All right. Yeah, I came across a few um, items that when I was update for the group. I was busy, as Ian mentioned earlier. um, what I was able to do is I adapted ASVS. So I started with some OWASP standards. So I have ASVS. That is in our format now. So the application security verification standard. Um, MASVS, which is the mobile version of that standard. And then SCVS, the software component verification standard. So all three of those are now in our format. The MASVS, they are actually generating this in their build pipelines as of now. So all future versions of that standard will now produce this format. Same thing for SCVS. ASVS, this is still kind of a work in progress. It's a much bigger project. So a lot more people are kind of eyeballing what it is that we're doing, but that will eventually be part of their release process as well. The one OWASP standard that I really want to get to that I haven't yet is the OWASP SAM. SAM is it's if you're familiar with BSIM, it's kind of similar to that, except BSIM is more observed and OWASP SAM is more prescriptive. This is what you should do versus this is what I have observed you doing. So it's a very different model in that regard, but their data model is a lot different than BSIM, although, so it's going to be a much more difficult to capture their data model in Cyclone in a way that we need it to be done. But it is possible. I have run into a couple of interesting, things. And BSIM is in there first as well. So I was able to engage with Synopsys. They are the entity behind BSIM. And BSIM originally started out as a project by Cigital, and they were later acquired several years ago by Synopsys, and they've continued that program. But I have engaged with Synopsys. They are interested in in supporting this effort, so that was great news. The other interesting news that I found out, and it's really small print on one page in the BSIM report, is that I was under the impression that the BSIM itself was, you couldn't necessarily reproduce it, right? Which is kind of a problem if you want to take standards and put it into a machine readable format. You have to reproduce those standards. But BSIM is actually available under a Creative Commons license, which I did not know. So I also learned something with talking with Synopsys as well. So anyway, a couple takeaways from this, in that one, I think I ran across a standard that had requirements, and those requirements have titles. And I think that was the BSIM actually. The other, and so I added a title to the object model. No big deal. The other thing that I ran into, and it might play a role in how you would take a machine readable representation of a standard and make a human readable, and that is the order in which things appear, the ordinal. So we could do something like an integer, for example, to describe that, or we could simply say that this array of things needs to be in order if you want to reproduce it. for human consumption. Either way is acceptable as long as we document what it is and let people know. So those are a few things I kind of ran across while I was taking those existing standards and migrating it to this format. So with that, I'll kind of see if you have questions or thoughts.
Thanks, Steve, thanks for doing all that. I mean, that's fantastic work. I really think it's critical to getting people to understand what it is we're doing. So it's really amazing. As you know, I've also been working with the PCI. I talked to Jake about this effort, and he's interested in not only just learning more about what we're doing, but also putting the PCI standards into this format. So that's exciting. I think that's a big, well-known standard. So it'll bode well for the project.
That's fantastic. I gave a briefing to CISA last week on CycloneDX 1.5. So 1.5 had it had a massive amount of new things in it, and CISA wanted a briefing. So I gave that last week, and the last 5 minutes or so of that was about all the things that are coming in 1.6, which for the most part is cryptography bill of materials, which is already half baked, right? With a lot of the work that IBM and a few others have done in that area. And then the work that we're doing for attestations. And there seemed to be some interest from CISA in the attestation work, which is great. I left the door open. I mean, I don't know how much CISA would participate or if they're friends at NIST or whatever, but I'm not sure how much the government has participated in OWASP standards, but everyone has an equal seat at the table, including the government. So I invited them to participate in both the CBOM as well as this work, but that this work has made a tremendous amount of progress over the last 3 months. So that was communicated to CISA. So yay. I think we're in a good spot.
Yeah, it's all great.
I think I saw the meeting invite, Jeff, for PCI. So that's great. That's this Friday, right? Or this?
Yeah, Jake replied and said that was the one time this week he couldn't make. So I'm going to have to try and shift it around. My guess is it'll end up next week, but let me know if there's a list of times that works for you next week. You can shoot them over, or I can just send invites until we find one that works.
Okay, sounds good. You can use my
Thanks.
Calendary as kind of, you don't have to schedule. I mean, if you just want to look at my availability, the
Yeah, that's
Calendary,
perfect.
yeah, just use that as reference.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Ian had also done a PR for SSDF, and I'd really like to get that in there soon as well. So do we as a group, we want to go through that real quick? Do we want to go through that, maybe the stuff that I done, if there's any questions on what the stuff that I had done? I mean, we can look at all of the stuff that we're, either we think we're done with or kind of in the works, and just talk about it and discuss it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think there's a couple of comments that were made that I thought would be good to bring up.
Yeah, I was just adding a couple. I was just replying back to a few of them too, because it's been a crazy week on my end. Didn't have a chance really to do that as much as I want to do. So just threw a couple more in there.
Perfect. So I think one thing that I saw that was different between Steve, what you did and I had is we're talking about the tree of requirements. There may be a list of top level requirements. And I put the parent as the BOM ref of the standard in it instead of leaving it blank, which is something that you left blank on yours.
Yeah.
That kind of brought up the question in here of like, do we have an implicit root? Do we have a root object that we want to use? Or do we want to just keep multiple root objects? Because, that's the way with SSDF anyway, you have the scopes, the groupings.
Yeah. I'm actually of the mindset. So if we look at how like the dependency graph is done, right? The dependency graph, you specify the BOM ref of the metadata component, and that has your direct dependencies. So I think it makes sense for consistency's sake to actually always specify a parent. I think it would make sense actually to make the parent required, because you're always going to, because you'd always have one, right? Even if you don't have any nesting, you'd still have a requirement that the parent is part of that particular, or the parent is in fact the standard itself. I don't really have any strong opinions either way, but it is a difference that I did notice.
Okay, let me share my screen just so we can look at the actual thing here. That might help a little bit. The specific comment here was, I think this is a good way to view it, right? For SSDF, you have the standard as the actual root, then you have the grouping, like P0, P1, P2, right? And then you have the practice and tasks below that. So I do think it actually makes a lot of sense to have the standard itself be that kind of root node. I kind of like this as a solution. I thought it worked well. Also works if you have multiple standards, right? Easily maps those root levels, however many root levels there are in the standard. It's a scalable approach, I think.
Yeah, because right now the requirements are, I took the approach that the requirements objects always fall within the standard. So you have an array of standards, and within each standard, you have an array of requirements. I took the approach that, well, if it doesn't have parent, then the standard is the parent.
So kind of
So
implying the standard as opposed
it,
to.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So
My concern would be if you have multiple standards in one document, which this format does support, that becomes nebulous at that point.
actually,
Potentially.
it wouldn't. It wouldn't, because you still have the requirements underneath the standard. So technically, you're not going to get them confused. But you are, it's implied, it's not declared, it's not explicit. And I don't know if I like that or not. And one of the reasons why I think this difference came about was we were really focused a lot on getting the right schema for all the use cases. And one area that we have not done right now is actually come up with descriptions for all of the fields, which is something that we have to do.
Yeah.
So once we actually create the descriptions for the fields, that's going to provide a lot more guidance. And right now, Ian and I did not have that guidance. So he did one thing, I did another.
Yeah.
Which one's right? I don't know.
Looking at this here though, right? I do think it makes sense that there could be multiple root nodes within the standard, but that brings into your point of ordinality. How do we actually order it? I think it's probably fine to support this kind of a thing because to leave the parent blank even, rather than bomb refing the thing that it's actually in here. So I do think it's okay to leave these blank and have multiple root nodes within this and then support the ordinal concept for what the priority is. One thing we'd have to consider is that's the ordinality within the requirement tier. So like if you've got multiple parents, it's ordinal within whatever the shared parent is, not ordinal for the entire thing, right?
Exactly. And that's kind of what I came across with which one was it? It was BSIM, because BSIM is structured, it's structured by domain. and the domains don't necessarily have a number, right? It's a label. And if you wanted to create, like ASVS, it's 1.0 and 2.0 and 2.1, and you can order that. But
Yeah.
I can't order the things like in BSIM by name unless it was one, either alphabetical, or two, if the list was represented the order itself.
Yeah, and that one I think is really dangerous because that can cause, I think, a lot of issues. I'd almost
Exactly.
rather not do that and then just have an ordinal in there, and then the fallback would be by bomb ref or something like that, alphabetical by bomb ref.
I'm of the same opinion. So yeah, but I didn't want to do it without talking to the group first. Adding
Yeah,
a
I think that
title
makes sense.
that was easy, but
I think another difference, Steve, that you have that I don't, or maybe the other way around, is on all the bomb refs, I try to include the standard in the name of the requirement. Thinking that, hey, there's the future where there's multiple standards together. So if you just have paragraph numbers, they're going to collide pretty quickly.
Mm.
So I think that maybe be something to update in the four so that are already in there.
Yeah,
At
okay.
least a recommendation, if not a requirement. Like, hey, this is a recommended pattern because of this reason, but technically they can do what they want.
Right. Yeah, okay. Was that the only two differences? What else was in that SSDF one?
We talked about signatures. Would we want to, because there is a signature block at the very bottom of the doc, right? And the question is, do we want to, as we are publishing this, sign this to say that these are the OWASP ones, like sign this as OWASP saying that these are the standards that you can use and we generated them and cross-check them? Or do we not want to do that at all?
Hmm.
So again, for context,
Yep.
signature. There were also some questions then around this. Do we want to include it and leave it blank to indicate that it has not been signed? Do we want this to always be a required field to show that it is signed or not signed, even if it's blank? Do we want to imply that with that, or do we want to take it out and just not have it if it's not signed?
It would fail validation if it was like that right now. So it's if it's not there, it's not signed. That's the way the rest of the spec works.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then for us, we would just, so for this PR, I would say probably then remove it. And then if we want to talk about adding signatures, that's something as part of a GitHub action or something like that, that we could actually sign these documents as part of a workflow.
Yeah. I was validating all of mine. I had to do it manually, but I was validating all of my all the things that were in there were actually conformant to the JSON schema that I checked in. Where is it? Oh, have I not checked that in? Shame on me, really?
And I'm just taking notes. So per our conversation a second ago, I want to make sure that I have this correct in here. For the conversation, we can remove the standard and have those multiple root nodes within the standards. Actually, not root, parentless. So that is what we agreed to here, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, let's see. I forgot to check in the 1.6 schema for the attestation work. So let me do that right now.
Oh, there was something that we found around external refs. There's a lot of repetition. So if we take a look here at the high level, here's the bomb ref P01, right? External references. There's an external ref in here of documentation, and then the URL. In this instance, it's the table with the link in there, right? But or with a very specific reference in there, right? A2, B2, etc. The question is, do we want this level of granularity? Do we want this external linking to go all this way? Originally, I thought the external reference was a bomb ref to the actual references section that was, I believe, down below in the standard. But that was kind of one of the things that we had talked about. Yeah, because external references is a root object. We want all of them listed out down here with then the ref up here, as I thought originally what we talked about. Kind of going back and forth. This seemed weird, right? If we have external,
I followed what's in CycloneDX 1.4, 1.5, the way that external refs are structured. But I would say yes, in our conversations and kind of in the sample that we put together, it's more like what you said, Derek.
Yeah. So for example, if I was doing this, I'm lazy sometimes. I would have just put this one URL down in that external references section, right? And then I would have used a bomb ref up here instead. And that way I just would have had the same bomb ref for everything in the standard. And if I was looking at it from that perspective, I probably would have wanted to say, hey, can I just have one external reference for the standard as a whole, right? And then just imply that all of these things are in there. Not every standard publishes a table out like this that you can reference specifically, or specific page numbers or paragraph numbers. So I figured it was worth the conversation here of like, how do we want to handle this type of scenario?
Yeah, I didn't go down to this level. I could have in a few standards, but I chose not to. I actually put the external references in the standard itself, in the standard object itself. And I think I referred to like the website and the documentation and, you know, that sort of thing. Issue tracker in some cases.
Yeah, so the standard object itself has the requirements as a root node within the standard object, and then all the way down at the bottom it has that that external references as part of that same level.
Right.
So what you're saying then is you basically put in like the type with the reference here for it, and you did not include anything at all in the external references.
I did not know.
Okay. And I think that's okay, to be honest. It's all optional anyway, but
Right.
I don't know if we wanted to offer guidance one way or the other. If it's something that we should talk about, because maybe this means the pattern isn't quite right. I don't know. Just wanted to make sure to tag it so we could talk about it.
Yeah.
I think the thing that's hard is if we were to do bomb refs here back to like an external reference for the overall standard, that's syntax is not in CycloneDX today, right? I think that just took a look, but external refs only have type, URL, hash comments. They don't have a bomb ref associated with them.
Right. The field that we had created a couple of those in this standard here for things outside of this world. We have a lot of arrays. We have a lot of arrays that can just be a list of bomb refs. That was for when we were actually saying how we're doing these things, right? Or where the evidence was, I think was the big example of that. But if we're doing, you know, external references here per standard object, I honestly don't know if we need this level of granularity or not. It's an optional field, so maybe it doesn't matter, but
I don't have a strong opinion. I think you're right that it's optional. Most people aren't going to need it. I figured if we're putting a good standard together, I'd just go ahead and throw them in. But
yeah, I'm fine with
clearly
it.
not necessary.
okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I mean, if we already have it, I don't want to spend time taking it out because it's already there. So I put the link to the 1.6 schema. So Ian, when you get a chance, can you like manually validate what you checked in just to make sure that it's conformant?
And then for the schema, we can just add in the any of the missing fields or any of the explanations or things like that. We can put it in here and generate the
Yep.
doc right out of it.
Notice all the descriptions are empty.
Yep. Well, not all of
So-
them. There's a lot of to-dos, but not all of them.
Well, that's stuff that's already, well, yeah, most of them are empty. Yeah. Yeah, at least for the attestation work anyway. Everything else should be filled in.
And as we're doing this, we could actually do a GitHub workflow to use the schema as defined and actually try to lint it. So we can do that
Yeah.
as part of the PR process.
Yep, exactly.
Looking here, this was what we talked about in terms of like recommending this pattern. And then
Okay.
that was it. That was it from in here, I think.
I think the other piece of information I'm lacking right now is license on this. I wasn't sure what that was, so I can go track that down. I don't know if I necessarily hold up.
DF. I think all those government documents are explicitly public domain, which doesn't have like an SPDX license ID, but it does have a government public domain license thing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure all government stuff has to be public domain by law.
Yeah. It's just how do we express the government public domain verbiage there. So we have to dig it up maybe, that license text and put it in there.
Okay. Looks like it's Creative Commons has it. So, all right, I'll include this then.
Oh, they've got a public domain. Is that the US government public domain stuff, or is that a different?
I do not know.
Okay. Because I know the US government has its own specific public domain text that
Okay.
they use. I remember seeing that on I think the NIST GitHub organization, I think, has some of the public domain license text that they use.
Cool. All right, I'll release still from them.
They explicitly have a declaration in the SSDF that says this publication is not subject to copyright in the United States by non-governmental organizations.
Right.
Attribution is appreciated, they say.
Got it.
All right. All right, I'll make those couple changes and send back out.
Okay. I just updated the Google Doc to refer to the third-party standards repo and to the 1.6 branch where we have that particular schema. So I just updated that document. And what's this? Resources, data gov, open license. Oh,
I was just reading, there's some interesting discussion in this page. It says specifically when if no other open license applies, the following URL should be used for the license field, and it lists usa.gov/public domain/label/1.0. It's just, I don't know.
okay, interesting. Okay,
Guess
so
the
do
other
we
question
have,
there is what's the license of the actual repo itself here with third-party standards and everything? Because as is right now, there's nothing on there. So does that mean people can use it? I think that implicitly means all rights reserved and there's no way to use it.
Common criteria 0 looks to be the way that you express a public domain dedication. So it's a license, but it's not really a license. It's just like an assignment to the public domain.
right?
That's a good one. I didn't know we were going to get into like a law school hypothetical on this call.
Yeah, me neither. Um, during my briefing with CISA, I did mention the fact that we spent some time on signatures and the fact that we've identified, signature as a way for you to express authenticity, and signature as in signatories. And the fact that for signatories, we can do both digital signature and analog signature. And the feedback from NIST was actually, or CISA was actually quite positive. So they I think appreciated the fact that we've thought about all of this. So we should probably in some future meeting, we should probably like start creating some samples of some of these different scenarios would be my guess, so people have a some examples to kind of refer to.
Or we could use the use cases that we came up with in like the second or third
Yeah.
meeting.
Yep, exactly. Yep. That's a document I
Honestly,
was just updating too.
yeah, is there a way to do, I'm not sure how OWASP does it in general in terms of documentation generation and the like, but I've used to use Markdown a lot for that kind of thing, MK Docs. Just do it as part of the repo and then have it come out of the repo itself as its own GitHub site kind of deal. That way it's
Yeah.
all in code and everything else, but is
Yeah.
there a way that that is sort of more standard to do it in the organization or?
Yeah. We use Pandoc like a lot of other places do, right? But there's a couple things that we can do for the attestations, right? We can have it. Well, one, it will, once it's released, it'll be part of the CycloneDX specification, so you'll see it as part of the schema documentation. Not that it's going to be really useful to most people, but it'll be there. The other thing that we can do is the use cases and examples. We can provide maybe a page or a snippet of how to do it. But I think we might want to consider doing a dedicated guide for this specifically. So the guides that we do, I don't know if you saw the SBOM guide, but that actually had a lot of positive press. But the source for that is all Markdown, and then we've got a build script that converts it to nice, pretty PDF and that sort of thing. So
Okay.
we can do the same thing for the attestation work.
Awesome.
So that would be my recommendation, because it's going to be a completely different audience in a lot of cases than maybe the reader of like SBOM, for example.
How much, this might be premature, but what types of engagement we want to have with individual CLI and other projects within CycloneDX do we want to have on this? Like knowing that we're talking a lot about like merging of SBOM standard of the standard with requirements, like what's an appropriate time to engage with the different other sets of tooling?
Yeah. Sooner rather than later, for sure, especially for Java and Go, and .NET. Those are kind of the three, because those are our quote unquote reference implementations, right? They support the entirety of the spec. Python, JavaScript, they come close, but I don't think they're reference implementations at this point. But yeah, I mean, we can get engaged with the maintainers of those things. Generally a good couple of months before we release is a good time to do that. Now, if we think the attestation stuff is 90% baked, we can start working on that now. But if we think things are going to change, then we might want to hold off for just a little bit. But yeah, merging and whatnot, that's gonna have to that'll have to be another use case for that too, because I think the merging will be a little bit different, won't it? Especially if they're signed. So
in terms of the stuff you brought up earlier, though, I think the only real thing we need to add in was the ordinal piece.
yeah,
Was there anything else specifically?
not that I've seen. So I saw the title. I'm like, yeah, okay, we need one. And then I came across the fact that we need ordinal. That was really all that I ran into when I did ASVS, MASVS, BSIM, and SCVS. So that was it. Now I don't know if we're gonna. I don't think we will. I know how PCI is structured. I don't think we'll run into any issues there either. Now I don't know about some of the ISO standards, but then again, ISO is behind the paywall, so I don't know if they'd be willing to do a lot of this or not. So I'm not sure.
A thing that I ran across when I was actually doing something for the CASA assessment, Cloud Application Security Assessment. They map everything to CWEs, Common Weakness Enumerations. As part of kind of going through that, would that be a good field for us to have in here or available in here somehow? The reason I ask is when I was going through the audit process specifically, I was using various tools that they recommend as part of their process. It maps to CWE IDs, and the standard only cares about certain CWE IDs. So it would be really handy for me if I had something that could just filter out all of the identified vulnerabilities by CWE and map it to the standard by the CWEs that it cares about. I think that that's probably one of the only standards that actually does that, but figured throw it out there. We supported one specific identifier for that. Are we thinking maybe that for the I'm throwing it out there as a conversation piece because it was something I ran into literally today and yesterday, and I did it in Excel, but something that might be easier here, or might be easier if we had something like that here.
That's an interesting idea. I wonder if we wouldn't also want to map to like attack pattern, like KPAC or something. You could filter it a different way. I don't see what it hurts.
Yeah, I mean, the vulnerability objects already have support for CWE. It's just an array of CWEs, just an array of strings. So Cyclone already supports that. We could.
It would be another one of those. Yeah, it would be another one of those mapping exercises, and maybe it's better if we don't do that and we just have it as a function of I forget which part of the standard it was, but there was a field that we had identified for linking out to more of an open mapping solution.
OpenCRE.
OpenCRE, that was it. And then maybe have OpenCRE extend to support this, because that seems maybe like it's might be a better way of doing it. But I don't know.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence about it. I mean, we specifically said we weren't going to do mappings in the spec.
You asked for use cases, so I threw it out there.
Oh, I know, and that's valid use case. So the use case would be, what is the weakness if you don't apply this control, right?
Or in this standard, where does this well, you said we weren't going to do mapping, so I think that actually just speaks to it, but it would be in this standard, you know, where does this map to? What would this weakness be?
Right.
What would this concern be? I was thinking of taking a pass at CASA and seeing if I could pull it in here specifically. So when I do that, I'll take a look and see if it makes sense.
Yeah,
or if there's a good way to do it.
I'm
There's
kind
a
of on
lot-
the fence because, like, on one side, like we said, we weren't going to map to any standards. However, that's not really a standard; it's a taxonomy.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different. So I don't have like a strong opinion, I guess, either way.
Here's the danger. There's a lot of the requirements that we'll see are not specific to one particular weakness. So like, what if the requirement is for training developers or something? Then you're gonna have to list like every CWE for that training requirement. And it's gonna be, people are not gonna get the exact right list. Like, I know your secure coding training doesn't cover all 1,000 CWEs, but I know also that it covers a bunch of them. So then you're gonna have to figure out which ones it actually does and doesn't. It'll be hard to say for that requirement in general that it covers that CWE. And I think it's gonna be pretty tough, except in the case where there's a requirement that specifically maps to a CWE, like you will do output escaping on HTML elements to make sure you don't have XSS.
Right.
Then
So
obviously
CWE
map
79
to-
and 80, right? Yeah.
But I think it's
So-
gonna make a mess if we try to map requirements to CWEs, because you don't just have a list of requirements by CWE. Most requirements apply to all the CWEs.
Or they apply to a collection of them. And like that's where one of the things in CASA that we had to do was a fluid attack scan. Running that, they just have a CWE column that lists all of the ones that the particular vulnerability has. My thought was if we did that, we had something like that, we could do in the requirements another just array field of CWE IDs that are applicable to this area. The problem there would be that we'd have to have people actually go through and manually do that, right? Because I don't know any other standard that does that by default. So I do see it as being a value add in the long run to people using it, but it's a lot of work to potentially make that happen.
I'd be more inclined to see that mapping in the evidence part of the attestation, where you said, like, this defense that I just put in place to meet this requirement, it covers these CWEs. And, you know, then you structure your argument around that, as opposed to trying to make it part of the claim.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting idea maybe to keep playing with for a version 2 or something, see where it might fit in. But for right now,
If
pretty good the way it
CWE
is.
was a lot better, I'd be much more on board with this plan. But CWE is a circus. It's not a taxonomy. Actually, it's literally an enumeration, and they overlap, and it's really hard to figure out exactly what the right CWEs for something is.
I've been finding that in my very limited exposure already. Yeah.
It's a mess. I mean, it's just 1,000 things.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I think along the same lines, like something that I saw, and I just kind of left out, but I'm kind of curious if it's something to be included here. You know, the SSDF has like examples, like example criteria for meeting that we don't really account for in a taxonomy today. And then if you look at like OWASP, they have like discussions, which is similar. Basically, there's arbitrary help text.
Yeah,
Right,
the
that's
PCI
associated.
standards have auditor text too, like, you know, it's not exactly the requirement, it's just like surplusage, extra material.
So supplemental type text that ties on to the requirement,
Yeah,
Yeah,
which isn't the requirement itself.
right.
no.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, examples and interpretations. The PCI often issues interpretations of requirements to explain to auditors and development organizations, like how they should think about that requirement.
Well, then I'm looking forward to this meeting then, Jeff.
Yeah,
I think adding something like this might be a good field. Like, 'cause I like your word supplemental, and it can
Mhm.
either be just a block of text or maybe an array of text or text items.
yeah.
Would that would be part, so each supplemental text would be specific to a given requirement though, right? Yeah. And each requirement could have 0 or more supplemental text. And we can make that ordinal as well. Okay. All right. I'll add that. So the schema is, unfortunately, I'm going to have to run in just a few minutes, but the schema is checked in. I will add the supplemental text for requirements. Ian, you were going to just validate what you had for the SSDF and get that done, right?
That and remove the signature block and a variety of things related to that stuff. Yeah. I'll
Right.
definitely do that.
Okay, and then I will revisit the 4 that I've done and standardize the way the bomb refs are represented. So that'll be done.
You talked about updating descriptions in the schema. Do you
Yeah.
want to do that through a separate PR? We can just kind of swarm on, or how best?
Yeah, now that we've got we'll definitely talk about it next, because I don't think we're gonna get them all done by next week. But whatever we don't get done by next week, we can discuss the text for those during the next meeting. But yeah, if you want to go ahead and now that the schema is checked in, apologies for not doing that earlier, and start recommending some text for these descriptions. I think a lot of them actually are kind of obvious, but there's some other ones that are going to need some very clear wording. Words matter. So, but yeah, if you have time, go ahead and do that between now and the next meeting. So I believe I have a description for every single property that's in the attestation. And I believe, for the most part, if you did a search for description where the quotes are empty, you'll find everything that then needs a description. Is kind of how I left it.
To make this potentially easier, do we want to pull that out into something like a Google Doc, Google Sheet?
Yeah, whatever the group
Those
finds
fields.
easier. Sure.
That way we don't have to worry about like crossing over each other when we're, trying to commit in or do PRs or anything like that.
Yeah. Who wants to do that? Anybody want to take lead on that?
I'll do it. I'm
Ian?
happy to.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Ian. All right, no, good suggestion. So pass that link around when you get a chance, and any last minute thoughts from anyone? I think we're in a pretty good shape though, from what I'm seeing. And the fact that we were able to stress the standard with a lot of, different implementations so far, I think is a good sign of what we've done so far.
I was going to try to start OS Cal probably next, Are there other ones that we want to target?
Okay. Yeah, I don't have a preference, so.
It's really amazing progress, Steve. When I sit on these CISA calls, I get frustrated with the pace of things. And I'm in a startup world, so we're constantly just, rolling stuff out, trying new things. And this was just like that. I mean, you guys really came together and made this happen really fast.
Yeah.
And it's good.
I think so. I'm proud of the work that we've done. I really am. Yeah. I think it's coming along really, really well. I'm really anxious to see see some of the PCI supplemental text. So if you have like a reference for that, Jeff, if you can send it my way, that would be probably really beneficial.
Yeah, sure. All the standards are public. So I'll just send you a link to them. You can download
Okay.
them.
Okay. Awesome.
One thing I would say is we've put a lot in right now to the standard side of things, right? And so I think that we've validated this really thoroughly from that perspective. We haven't done a lot of actual trying to meet the standard in here, right?
Sure.
So granted, we have to do this first, but I think that that's one more thing that we do have to kind of use it a little bit internally, see how it works, make sure that we're not missing anything from that perspective as well. I don't think we are, but I think that's the one remaining piece to really feel good about it. And if we can push this out to broader audiences, have them provide some of that feedback as well, that'll be, I think those are the two things really that we still need to do.
Yeah, I'm going to try to do SSDF once we get that kind of solidified, because my team is actually doing this exercise right now, my day job. So so I'll be doing that for SSDF, at least trialing that capability and seeing if we can represent that. The one thing that's going to be interesting is, and I don't know if we're there yet, saying that we meet this requirement because we've had this BSIM assessment over here that says we've done it. So it's going to be an interesting way to express it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to diving in and figuring out how it works, in reality. So I got to run, gentlemen. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.
You too. Bye.
Thanks, good. Have a good one.